I want to talk about mobility. That is going to be one of our biggest challenges, and I don't think I'm being shrill by saying I think it's a crisis, and it's a crisis in all big cities. As we run out of TxDOT money, I just was at the Regional Transportation Council meeting earlier this afternoon over in Arlington, and TxDOT's running out of money. And cities are challenged with aging infrastructure. Our streets are getting older, our sidewalks are getting older. Mobility is becoming an issue. In the 70s and 80s, people kept moving further and further out, and we stretched our street infrastructure to a certain point. We neglected what was going on in the inner city streets, and now in the last 10, 15 years, people are starting to move back into the urban core. People are moving back into the inner city, putting additional loads on our urban streets. That look at West 7th Street right now. You've seen all the construction that's happened along there. That's a huge, wide, 6-lane street. It funnels down at the bridge at the Trinity River, but it's a big street, and you're already starting to get significant congestion issues there. You're going to see that get worse along Forest Park. You're going to see it get worse along 8th Avenue. You're going to see it get worse along Hemphill. All the arterials that feed into our downtown core are going to continue to be stressed. And we have to come up with an answer to that even during a tough budget time. We have to be planning for the day when we have commuter rail extensions, when we have a modern streetcar system. We still have to keep planning for the future. We would be derelict to say, oh, you know what, times are tough now, so we're not going to plan for when times are better. We're just going to put it on hold until times actually are better. We have to keep the planning going. Our Southwest Parkway, dirt has turned on that and should be open in 2013, so that's 3 years away. I have to tell you, I miss every single day the access from Forest Park to Interstate 30, but we'll work around that for the next 3 years. Same thing, we'll have some challenges with Hewlin Street Bridge, also off of Vickery, but that's some of the inconvenience that we'll have to deal with up until the point at which Southwest Parkway is open and fully going. Anyone who ever comes from the West Freeway and wants to go north on the North Freeway knows that you sit on a ramp forever and ever and ever trying to get onto the North Freeway, North 35W. I was in DC 2 months ago asking for additional funding from our congressional representatives to expand I-35W. We're still working on that. That's one of our top priorities in terms of highway infrastructure after Southwest Parkway, because that is just a mess. And anyone who lives in far north Fort Worth, God help you if you've got to come downtown to work every day, because it is just a complete mess. I mentioned briefly commuter rail. We have been working with the Council of Governments on what they call the Cotton Belt line. We've been calling it the Northeast to Southwest Rail Extension, which actually the southwest portion of that is the Fort Worth and Western Railroad that's right behind you guys. That is the alignment. We have not come to an agreement with the Fort Worth and Western Railroad yet over getting access to that. We will actually use the freight rail line that they have and basically rent time on it. But at the places we have stations, we'll have to purchase a new easement from the Fort Worth and Western to create the double tracking necessary to pull those commuter rail cars off next to the station, allowing people to get on while the freight rail passes by on the main line. So that's something that we're still in negotiation with Fort Worth and Western Railroad. Those of you who've lived in this neighborhood for a long time know that sometimes Fort Worth and Western is a tough negotiator, and we're still in that process. I do think, though, that we're getting closer to having the adequate funding that we need to do the rail to do the program. It's basically an extension of the TRE that goes to Dallas, and right now it terminates at the Texas and Pacific station on the southern end of downtown. It will continue south down to Summer Creek in southwest Fort Worth, and then it will also then loop back around downtown, go north to basically kind of the Stockyards area, and then shoot going northeast through North Richland Hills, Haltom City, North Richland Hills, through Keller. There'll be a station in Keller, and then the terminus will be at Terminal B at the airport. So you will be able to go down here to the station that is just south of Berry and Cleburne Road, or go to the station that is proposed for Forest Park and Rosedale. It's actually not. It's actually 12th Avenue in Rosedale, right there just to the east of the railroad tracks, and be able to park your car or be dropped off by your honey and take your bag and take the train all the way to DFW Airport. And that is an incredible thing, and I can't wait for that to happen. That is also proposed to be completed between 2013 and 2014. Like I said, we're working on figuring out ways to fund that. I mentioned the modern streetcar. This is something that it's probably not likely that it'll ever come to Berkeley, but it's something that impacts you guys in terms of having access. For example, you could go to the proposed commuter rail stop at Rosedale, and hopefully we could get the modern streetcar system to come out to that area, and you could take it all the way through the hospital district at some point in the future. We here in Fort Worth, most light rail lines like you see in other cities, they're on abandoned rail right-of-way. Those were largely railroads that went bankrupt in the 60s and 70s. Those alignments were available. They were basically just empty tracks. The cities would go in, they'd buy that right-of-way, they put light rail on it. We don't have any of that here. Our railroads are all very healthy. We got the Burlington Northern Santa Fe situated here. We got Union Pacific. There's a lot of activity on all of our rail lines, so we don't have the real estate to put a light rail system, but we do own our streets. We own those outright, and we can put other modes of transportation on them. And so we have a modern streetcar committee that went through a kind of initial first round, looked at it as a possibility, made some proposed starter alignment recommendations. We now have gotten a grant from the North Central Texas Council of Governments. It's a congestion mitigation and air quality grant to do a study to actually look at those alignments and say, did these work? And then the other charge that they've been given, this committee, is to assess how do we pay for it? Can we pay for it? And they'll be doing that work over the course of the summer. They will come back with a recommendation in September. If their recommendation is to move forward and the City Council votes yes on it, then at that point the engineering and environmental part of this works. Right now we're just looking at the financial, and we're looking at the potential riderships. We're looking at where do we get the most bang for our buck. And these things are not just mobility programs, they're economic development programs. Anyone who's ever been to Portland and been through the Pearl District, that was a wasteland in 2000. That was 10 years ago. That wasn't that long ago. And you can see where the streetcar line is in Portland, not because you can actually see it, but you can see that's where all the density is. That's where all the buildings are. And that was the impact, I think, when you go there. You look out, it's nice to get on this nice clean car. We had a trip out there that was paid for by some donors that allowed all the council members to go out there. It was great to see, for example, council member Danny Scarth roll literally right off the curb, seamlessly right onto the bed of the car in his wheelchair. Nice, air-conditioned, clean, not frightening people on it. It was a great experience. But then when you turned around and looked out the window, that was the other impact, because everywhere you look, you saw construction cranes. You saw new buildings going up. You saw development, and that's quite telling on the role of this not only as a mobility issue, but as an economic development issue.